Forsaken Realms, Vahrin's Call is at its best when you stop treating it like a guided tour and start poking at it in curiosity. It doesn't really hide secrets everywhere, and most of the weapons are fairly generic, but it constantly suggests that there might be something more if you just wander a little off course. You start finding skill books, side paths, little detours, the odd encounter here and there. It all feels designed to reward curiosity in a very baby's first RPG kind of a way, where discovery is simple, obvious, and always just one step beyond the main path. Hi, I'm Vadd, and I review games after completing them. Here in Vahrin's Call, we completed the main story, the epilogue. We spent some time exploring side paths, skill books, equipment quests, and a handful of the game's collectibles here. The problem for me is that eventually I stopped wanting to look for all this side stuff because Vahrin's Call here ties so much of your character progression to exploration that finding secrets slowly changed from something rewarding into something I felt I was required to do. And that kind of creates a strange RPG adventure. On one hand, it gives you a ton of freedom in how you build your character, but at the same time, there's some frustration around the restriction around that freedom. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think right up front, I want to say I enjoyed this, but whether I recommend it really depends on what you're willing to tolerate. For me, that tension between sticking to the story or stopping to explore every nook and cranny and take that detour for the upgrades became a defining part of my journey. Vahrin's Call here is a third-person action RPG built around a classless character system. You aren't picking warrior or mage or archer, you just use what you want. You start using one-handed weapons, you start using two-handed weapons, you pull out a bow, you use some magic, you use some traps. As you use the skills, you improve and level them up. You can freely respec your skill points whenever you want. I think on paper that's obviously a great foundation for experimentation, and for me, it works. There's a catch. Yes, Vahrin's Call looks like it's offering complete character freedom, but mechanically, it doesn't quite do that. There are a few restrictions on how you change your skills. You need to find these skill books. Your progression isn't controlled only by your levels. You need to find these skill books, and they're hidden throughout the world. And this is where, for me, things get complicated. By the end of my run, I had several skills that were maxed out. Their level was high enough to unlock more abilities, and I had skill points from leveling up to spend on the individual skill abilities, but I was unable to progress because somewhere in my journey on one of the previous adventures, I missed the skill book I needed for that skill, and I had no idea which one I missed or where it was. Other times I'd be exploring every single corner I could, and I would find the skill book tucked away, and I'd be so excited. I'd walk up to it, I'd open it up, and I'd discover it belonged to a weapon or a magic type I wasn't using. There's an interesting mechanic here where even your basic stats are encouraging you to play outside your chosen build. For example, your health progression is connected to the weapon skills. So if you're mainly playing an archer or maybe a big two-hand sword fighter, eventually you're going to have a reason to use a different melee weapon to level it up, to spend the points in to increase your total health bar. Same thing with magic. You've been throwing fireballs. Eventually, you're going to need to start throwing some ice spells so you can level up your total magic pool. I like the classless system because I think it encourages players to experiment. At the same time, it didn't feel like I was allowed to build exactly the character I wanted. It felt like there's this contradiction here. On one hand, Vahrin's Call here is offering freedom. Then I kept finding small ways that told me, hey, here's how to use that freedom. Yes, it's fun to explore. By the way, you'll have to keep exploring to find the skill book you need. Yes, I know you're really enjoying the two-hand build, but your health pool's capped out. If you want more stamina regen or HP, you're going to have to use this other playstyle. Hey, if this review is helping you out, liking the video genuinely helps the channel here. It tells YouTube that more people want to see this. And if you want to support the channel more directly, there's a single pay what you want tier through Patreon, as well as YouTube channel members to help fuel future videos. Thank you. I want to make a comparison here between the beginning of the game and some of the later hours. The basic progression loop does not change. You enter a new area, you start to stay on the main path, and you start to wander away from the obvious path. You find the chest, you climb up somewhere that's a little bit off the beaten path, you discover a skill book, you kill some enemies, you head back, you upgrade your equipment, you go back out again, right? And I think the level design overall supports this extremely well. This is not an open world game. It's really separate areas connected through doors, portals, and load screens. But I still found that most main areas gave me plenty of room to explore. Secondary paths, caves, ruins, vertical routes, hidden spaces. For me, the problem became repetition. Into the late game, it felt like every map was asking me just the exact same question over and over again. Where are the chests located? Where's the skill book? What corner haven't I checked? And after doing that enough times, man, I just didn't want to explore. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I was worried I would miss something my character needed, so I felt like I had to explore. It's a very different feel. For combat, there's a lot here more than I was expecting. There's different melee styles that give you very different options. The bows work, the magic works. I really like the combat. Alchemy lets you produce potions, you can dodge things, you can throw potions, there's a stamina system, there are traps, weapon techniques, blocking, dodging, parrying. There's just a lot here on the plate. No matter what you're serving up, the actual fights are very repetitive because you're going to be doing them a lot. There is a lot of combat here, a lot of combat. If you like that combat early on, you're about to have a good time because there's a lot of that combat. For me, the very first boss I fought was resistant to the damage type I had focused on. That means that everything I built my character around, I showed up at the boss and I couldn't do it. Yes, I could easily change my build around. There's this classless system, but I just focused on that damage type. I had to go back and relearn a different style of combat. On one hand, yes, I had the respecs, I had the flexible equipment, but on the other hand, I've got a character system here that tells me, hey, play however you want to, but then immediately the first boss stopped me in my tracks. I think all the bosses are very good, if not decent at worst, but very good at best. They all have their own individual movesets. They hit hard. There's nothing special here. You've seen these before. You've seen big boss with big move like this before. You're not going to be reinventing the wheel here. At the same time, death is also very forgiving. There are generous checkpoints throughout the adventure, throughout your exploration, and outside of every single boss room. I never felt like I lost a boss and had a long run back I was bemoaning. I just thought to myself, can I get him or not? Do I know how to dodge that attack that took me out? Do I have the right gear? Am I powered up enough? Yes, there's a dodge system, there's a stamina system, there's a blocking parrying system, but this game isn't really here to punish you like a Souls-like. For me, the bigger problem with combat was that sometimes melee felt more clunky than the magic or the ranged options, while at the same time, enemy AI isn't impressive. I don't think they need to be impressive, but they're pretty basic. They see you, they just run straight at you. At the same time, there's some platforming, and your movement and jumping and just picking up loot can be a little awkward with trying to get your character stance correctly. And occasionally the game is asking for some light platforming, like I said, and that awkwardness at times can be hard to ignore. I really did feel like exploration was rewarding. I was constantly opening hidden chests, glowing loot bags, and finding unique weapons, fun armor types, anything I wanted I could try and put on and use. At the same time, there is so much junk loot. If you're not building potions, you don't need a lot of the stuff you pick up. If you haven't specced into armor because you're not taking enough hits, you can't really wear the heavy armor. You can slot it on, but you lose your roll. Sure, you can pick up that giant two-handed hammer, but you have all your points in your poison bow, so it's going to feel a lot worse. I think this problem with the junk loot becomes more obvious when you run into a merchant who happens to sell you the material you've just been picking up for ages. It makes all that careful scavenging and exploration feel like wasted time, and then the interfaces kind of pile on top of this for me. Yes, all the menus I interacted with, all the UI, the user interfaces were clear to understand. I knew what they were telling me, but it never felt good navigating them. Every page jumps you back to the top of the list. The inventory and crafting screens, they're all functional, but they're just kind of bare bones and cumbersome. For a game with this many weapons, materials, spells, upgrade systems, I feel like the UI needed a little more to make managing the experience a little smoother. For me, the story here is much less interesting than the systems around it. I think there's a good combat system, there's crafting systems, upgrade systems, there's class systems. I love being able to pick up armor, put it on, and just go however I wanted to. And the story tying all together is pretty generic. That might sound like a bad thing, it might sound like a good thing. It's kind of just middle of the road here. You have a kingdom that's been at war, your king or your queen is dead, you've got bandits, you've got a magical threat. It's just a lot of generic fantasy stuff. You show up right at the start, you're a mercenary, you're there to make some money, trying to help with the bandits or the magical threat or whatever the side quest is or whatever the king or queen needs. It works. It just works. There's nothing here in the main story that's going to shock and awe you. If you've ever read or experienced a single fantasy story with bandits, a king or queen, a magical corruption, you've done this 1,000 times. It just works. That means that the characters in the story have to carry the presentation and the narrative, and I didn't think the characters were particularly memorable. The main narrative is just a straightforward fantasy adventure. Mercenary shows up to kill bandits for the queen, the king's gone, or it's the king and the queen's gone. You know, it's mechanically an RPG, but this isn't a choices-driven narrative adventure. It's not a choice-driven RPG. For me, the personality of the story wasn't really in the main plot. It was in some of the side quests, some of the funny situations. I called them gnomes. They just wanted to send me cheeks the whole time. There's some cheesy humor here, and visually, I think overall there's this colorful high fantasy look that actually sometimes gave me some early Shrek or Fable energy. Just something about the world and the signs just kind of felt cheerful and playful. And then at the same time, it was darker. In the settings, you could turn off blood and corpses and hanged bodies, and those things are there. This is sometimes a grim world while also being wonderful, fantastical, and vibrant. You're going to spend a lot of your time running through bright forest, farmlands, colorful fantasy environments, and then dark caves, scary cities. There's a lightning storm, the blood has been spilled, everything's on fire. There's just this breadth of fantasy fictional environments that are fun to journey through. You might sit here and go, Vadd, you really haven't said a lot of strong positives about this game. Well, okay, you're not wrong. This is a critical review. It's rough, it's clunky, the interface is not great, combat starts to repeat itself, the story is forgettable, some of the progression systems actively worked against the freedom they're supposed to provide. There's clearly thought behind this world. There are actually secrets worth finding. There are fun quests to do. There are weapons worth experimenting. There are different builds you're going to try. There's little jokes you're going to find and laugh at. Everything here feels handmade. It's a place that makes me wonder what's around the corner, and I think that is worth something. I think the best version of this game doesn't need a completely different combat system. It doesn't need a massive cinematic story. I think it needs to trust its strongest ideas more. Keep the classless character building, keep the skill books, keep rewarding for exploration, but don't make a central progression depend so heavily on finding that one specific collectible. Give me more ways to unlock the skills if I miss the books. Give me a better way to track my progress and where I'm at. I know there's a map, but it's not fun opening the map and clicking through 16 map tags and then scrolling around going, am I the triangle or the little square? Where's my map legend? I want to see less disposable loot. I want exploration to feel exciting because I might find something useful, not stressful because I might permanently overlook something important. I think these small changes would preserve what makes Vahrin's Call interesting without removing its personality. And I think we got to talk about value for money. Forsaken Realms, Vahrin's Call here launched at $35 US, and there's a decent game here. There's a decent size game. I think you could rip through the main story in 10 hours, or I think you could spend 20 or 25 hours going through the main story. Depending on how thoroughly you explore, how much side content you engage with, how many secrets you push, you could be here 40 hours. You could be here 50 hours. That's not a small experience. At the same time, there's enough build variety here that if you're someone who really enjoys experimenting, you're going to get so much fun out of the combat. But don't think you're here paying for polish. You're going to pay for a surprisingly ambitious indie RPG with a lot of fun systems and a lot of rough edges. And I think at $35 US in today's current market, this is a reasonable, fair price. At the same time, I wouldn't blame someone for waiting for a sale. Maybe you just don't gel with clunky combat and you're afraid of that. Maybe the basic presentation or the dangers of the exploration just sound like things that aren't fun for you, and that's okay too. You know, I think Vahrin's Call here works best for players who miss an RPG that's willing to be a little weird. It's for people who like to wander off the path a little bit. It's for people who are willing to tolerate some jank and clunkiness when there's something interesting behind it. If you're the type of player who enjoys experimenting with weapons and builds instead of following one optimized stealth archer from beginning to end, you're going to like this. It's especially a good game, I think a good fit if you're the type of player who likes RPGs where exploration will continue to produce something more meaningful than just a pile of crafting materials. There's nothing better than opening a random chest and finding a magic weapon that you didn't even know, and now you're trying a different build because you've got a new magic weapon. It's flashy, it's fun. That happened to me all throughout my journey. That means we need to talk about who this game is not for. I would say you should stay away from this if you're really looking for a strong narrative RPG with meaningful decisions. That is not this game. I also would be careful if you don't like hunting collectibles, because I don't think skill books are just optional for the completionist enthusiast. I think they're a core part of progression. If you're also really in desperate need of polished movement, silky smooth melee combat, clean inventory management, these are things that are going to test your patience. For me, Forsaken Realms Vahrin's Call is rough, repetitive, and occasionally frustrating, but it's also much more interesting than its rough presentation might suggest. I think its greatest strength is giving you a world worth poking at and a character system that encourages experimentation. At the same time, the biggest weakness here remains that those two systems are a little too dependent on each other. Exploration starts as discovery and eventually becomes mandatory, unskippable homework. And I think that character freedom doesn't feel completely free when progression keeps pushing you towards use a different skill, weapon, or collectible you're not interested in to bump up your HP or your stamina or your mana for your magic. I still enjoyed enough of what Forsaken Realms Vahrin's Call is doing that I'm not here dismissing it. There are good ideas here. There is genuine personality here, and there are moments where the rough edges almost become part of the charm. For players willing to meet it on those terms, I think there's absolutely a worthwhile fantasy RPG here. This is a flawed game that is an absolute easy recommendation for the right player. At the time of review, Forsaken Realms Vahrin's Call is awarded a 2 out of 5. I recommend. I think by most objective conventional standards, this is not a particularly good game, but I absolutely think there's something here worth playing.